Let me ask you about one of the guys you're working with, Alabama's Jalen Milroe. Now, I spoke to him twice this past year. Really impressed with the dude personally. Obviously, there's a lot to like about his skill set. I like his mobility. What do you like about him, and what do you think sets him apart?
Well, you mentioned it was the first thing you said, ironically, his personality. Look, it's so easy when you have a world-class athlete or a world-class talent, I'll argue in any sport, to get caught up in the highlights and then lose track of another skill set that they have. So one of the examples is Josh Allen. For his first few years in the league, even though his first 2 years he was kind of figuring it out, third year went nuts. Like he was making so many highlight plays. It was the only thing people talked about, that nobody gave him credit for how smart he was and how quickly he learns everything. Coaches would. With Jalen, he's such a dynamic athlete, and strong statement coming, like the most dynamic athlete I've put hands on and worked with. I haven't worked with anybody who ran 4.37. That it's easy to lose focus or not even pick up on just how dynamic his personality is. So the first one is he's as likable. He is a magnet. Every type of person in the locker room is going to gravitate towards him. And Jim, he's that guy who you're like talking, let's say there's a group of guys and you're talking, and he starts telling a story, and it's not even a funny story. And then he starts laughing, and his laugh's so good that now everyone's laughing, but like he's not even telling a funny story. It's just funny. He's just that guy. And so he's great. But what I've seen, because I just did his draft prep, but he started working with us in January of last year. And I've just seen a steady evolution of a guy who's bought into becoming a world-class mover. Not a world-class athlete, a world-class mover. And you and I have talked about it, how we use the ground to create movement, decelerate, change direction, remain balanced, use leverage, all the nerdy stuff that we do here. Now we've got somebody in our program in Jalen, and an NFL team's going to have him too, who's a world-class athlete who's in the process of becoming an elite and world-class mover efficiently. And I think it's going to be, whatever the scouting report is and the pundits on TV say right now, there's a lot of people they're gonna be miss or be wrong as his NFL story plays out.
All right, so consensus is building that Cam Ward is going to be the number one pick overall. Whether the Titans keep that pick or they move that pick, in your estimation, what is the team that does draft Cam Ward? What are they going to get?
Well, I've been watching Cam Ward actually for a while, since Incarnate Word is when he came on my radar. I was doing a pro day at Washington State, and they were telling me about this new kid who just transferred in. So he's been on my radar for a while. And the one thing I will tell you, similar to what I just said about Kyle McCord doing it at 2 spots, this guy's been productive at 3. Incarnate Word, Washington State, and Miami. And so when you look at the consistency of game tape and how much he's just gotten better every year, and then you start talking to guys who played with him. In fact, I was running Alabama's pro day, and I met a new receiver. I don't know his name, but a new receiver that Bama just got from Miami. And that guy doesn't know who I am. I'm just a guy on the field. And I'm like, hey, tell me about Cam Ward. And just the types of things that this guy said, and then talking to some other players, his private quarterback coach, Daryl Colbert, just getting familiarity with who he is as a guy and a competitor is the thing that is not going to show up in the media. And because he really had 1 year of prominence and notoriety at Miami, nationally, I think more people are trying to figure out who this guy is than have been waiting for this guy to be the number one pick. And so just because a lot of people don't know a lot about him doesn't mean that there's not a lot of good things to know about him. And as I've done my research, from watching tape to talking to folks like the wideout, I've heard pretty unanimous, pretty consistent, really, really positive feedback. And then in terms of his ability to make plays and compete and keep himself in every game, I think this guy's going to be a really good player at the next level, and he might be one of the few who's a really good player right away at the next level.
Jordan Palmer joining us. So in doing your research and talking to people, what are you hearing and what are you thinking about Shedeur Sanders?
I think it's interesting. My take on Shedeur is I've seen plenty of plays that he's made the last few years and situations he's been in that he's handled well that say, hey, this guy can lead a franchise. This guy can turn a franchise around. He can play at a high level. I think what I make of how he carries himself on and off the field, the good and the bad, and by the way, doesn't matter who you're talking about, there's good and bad ways that they carry themselves off the field. But he's no doubt, he's one of the biggest brands to enter the draft phase, right? In terms of just, he's built it, father, TV, like Colorado killed it in terms of ratings last 2 years. He is quite a brand. And I think that a lot of the positive and negatives that comes with this statement, he really conducts himself like a vet, and he's been around it. I mean, he grew up around it. But these last few years and really through this draft process, I think he's really carried himself like a vet. The positive side of that from a maturity standpoint, and the negative side of that, which when you're a vet, you don't really do all the little things necessarily, or there is a little bit of entitlement because you've been there and you've done it. And that's healthy. That's across every locker room in the NFL, every position. The problem is you better play like a vet, right? So let's say that somebody on the Washington Commanders called me last year, week 5, hypothetical, and they said, boy, Jaden Daniels is really starting to act like a vet. Well, I bet the vets on the team wouldn't care because Jaden Daniels was playing like a vet, right? So you can carry yourself however you want. You just have to back it up with a high level of play. And so it's not a concern of whether or not he can back it up. The concern is if he can't early, or if he's in a really difficult situation like rookies typically are, and he doesn't play like a vet. He's built this platform. We're all talking about him, and we're all going to be talking about him, where he's going to have to go through that for the first time in front of everybody. And that's where my question is how does that go? And so I have no idea what pick this guy's going to go and what team is in love with him and what team is not. But I am interested, like everybody, to follow along and go, this guy has been conducting himself and carrying himself like a vet, the good and the bad that comes with that. And so as his rookie season unfolds, once we get through the draft, if it goes difficult, which it way more often than not, it goes difficult for a rookie than what we've seen the last couple of years out of a couple of players, then how does he handle it? And he's not going to be doing that just in a big market. He's his own market. Whatever town he goes to, he's bringing his own market with him. And we've only seen this a few times, and it's gone well for some, and it's been really difficult for others.